My name is Julian Brooks. I'm 34 years old, born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. I work in product strategy, but most people know me now because of the panel. The one where I walked onto that stage in Boston, the house lights, hot on my shoulders, and a room full of strangers clapped like they'd been waiting for me. They didn't know who I was. Not really. They knew the title under my name on the screen. They knew the company I worked for. They might have read one of my case studies if they were ambitious. But they didn't know the part of me I was most certain they'd see first. The skin on my face, on my neck, the way it looked under stage lighting, unfiltered, unchanged. I was born with vitiligo. It started as a small spot near my jaw when I was 12 and spread slow and relentless over the next 20 years. It never hurt. It just changed everything. Kids didn't ask what it was. They asked if it was contagious. Teachers looked away when I tried to raise my hand. Photos got cropped. People laughed sometimes like it was a nervous tic. At some point, I stopped explaining. I learned how to breathe through it, learned how to walk into rooms knowing I was going to be noticed. Before I spoke, it makes you quiet, that kind of noticing. Not shy, just observant. You start reading people before they read you. You start preparing for jokes that haven't been made yet. So when I stepped into that conference hall, I expected the stares. Even now, after everything, I still expect them. I had on a camel blazer, dark green crew neck underneath, simple, clean. I looked good, I felt prepared, but I still scanned the front row for reactions. My name was called. I stepped up. And something strange happened. The applause didn't fade, it swelled, a full second longer than polite. It wasn't about me, not yet. They were applauding the moment, the structure, the prestige of the event, but I felt it anyway. And I looked out into that crowd and my eyes landed on someone I hadn't seen in almost 2 years. He was seated, in the fourth row, slightly turned in his chair, flipping the edge of his badge like he wanted it to fall off. And when he saw me, his face didn't move. Not even an inch. Just froze. He looked at me the way people look at fire when they realize it's not going to stop spreading. And for a split second, I almost smiled. Not out of spite, out of recognition. Because he had been one of them. One of the ones back then. 2 years. Earlier, I was just a mid-level guy in a shared workspace. They joked about my skin behind my back thinking I didn't hear them. But I did, every single time. I heard the nicknames, the punchlines disguised as banter, the whispers passed during presentations. I never responded, not once. I kept doing my work, delivering on time, showing up early, leaving late. I told myself the best revenge was staying, not rising above, just staying. And now, here I was, stepping behind a microphone with a name tag that didn't need an explanation, on a stage that none of them had reached. The applause finally faded, and I sat. The panel began. Questions started. I answered slowly, measured, the way I always do. I saw him glance down at his notebook. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't try to speak, but he didn't leave either. He stayed, and I knew exactly why. Because he couldn't look away from the fact that the person he once mocked now had the seat he thought he'd grow into. It wasn't triumph, I felt. It wasn't victory. It was steadiness. Like I'd been walking uphill for so long, I forgot what it felt like to stand still. And now, finally, the ground had stopped moving. No celebration. No punchback. Just silence. Just light. Just the weight of a name set into a microphone and a room that, for once, didn't flinch when they saw my face. I can still hear the laugh. Not just the sound of it, but the rhythm, the way it came after a pause, like it was waiting to see if anyone else would join in. And they always did. They never laughed alone, never risked that. It was safer to laugh in a group, safer to share the blame, dilute the cruelty until it passed as sarcasm or irony or just office banter. But I remember who started it. I remember who always laughed first, loudest, sharpest. His name was Chris. He sat 2 rows down from me in the open floor plan, just close enough that I could hear the jokes land, just far enough that he never had to look me in the eyes when he made them. It started small. I think it always does. One morning, someone asked if I got a bad sunburn. Another time, someone asked if I'd spilled bleach on my chin. I let it go. That's what you do, at first. You convince yourself it was nothing, that they didn't mean it the way it sounded. But then it kept coming. They talked about lighting angles in meetings, said it was hard to focus with contrast like that. One person joked about filters on Zoom, asked if there was a way to even things out. I smiled. Or I tried to. You get good at fake laughing when it's expected. You learn to control your face so the sting doesn't show. But inside, something contracts, tightens, pulls away. Chris was the one who gave me a nickname. He said it under his breath, but loud enough. Spotlight. At first, it sounded almost clever. I tried to own it, but then he started using it. In emails, Slack threads, introductions. And no one stopped him. No one asked him to quit. I'd walk into the break room and hear, "Here comes the spotlight," followed by smirks and half-averted eyes. He had charm. That was the worst part. The kind of easy likability that let him get away with more than he should have. The kind that turns cruelty into comedy when people are too cowardly to challenge it. And I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't want to speak, but because I knew how these things go. I'd seen it before. The moment you push back, you become difficult, too sensitive. Suddenly, it's not about what they said. It's about how you took it. I couldn't afford that. I didn't have the protection they did. I didn't have the face they'd defend or the body they'd trust to be neutral. I had work. That's it. My deliverables, my deadlines, my reputation for staying late, not complaining, getting it done. But that didn't mean I forgot. I remembered every glance that lingered a little too long. Every inside joke passed with eyes that darted toward me. Every time someone lowered their voice, not because they were afraid of being wrong, but because they knew they were being cruel. And Chris? Chris made it easy for them. He gave them permission. His laugh was a signal, a green light, and they followed. I used to watch the door when I worked late, just to make sure no one else was around. I didn't want the risk of small talk, the awkwardness of someone trying to act normal after a full day of ignoring me. I'd leave the office after dark, the city cold and quiet, and I'd sit in my car with the engine running, not going anywhere. Just letting the silence erase, the noise. Some nights I'd check my face in the mirror, stare at the patches around my mouth, down my neck, the shape of who I was and who they refused to see. And I'd wonder how much of me was me, and how much was what they'd made me feel about myself. But here's the thing about silence. It's not always weakness. Sometimes it's storage. Sometimes it's fuel. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't need to. Life has a way of circling back, of lifting the quiet ones to places the loud ones never thought they'd have to look up to. I kept showing up. I kept doing the work they joked about, and I built something out of the very thing they used to mock. Now I sit on a panel. Now I speak into microphones. Now the laughs stop when I enter the room, not because I demand fear, but because they finally realize what they gave up when they chose to laugh instead of listen. And I still remember who laughed first, and who laughed the loudest, and who isn't laughing now. The first time they brought a camera into the office, I instinctively found a reason to walk the other way. It was for some internal campaign, faces of the team, or day in the life, something light and glossy to humanize the brand. They wanted volunteers, which was code for they already knew who they were going to choose. No one asked me. I didn't expect them to. And when I passed by the break room and saw the lights, the tripod, the producer with a clipboard, and an iPad, I felt my stomach tighten like it always did around that kind of equipment. That quiet panic that starts at the edges of your body and moves in slowly, 1 inch at a time. I wasn't afraid of cameras. I was afraid of how I looked in them. or rather, how others looked at me through them. The vitiligo always showed more, on camera. The lighting made the contrast sharper. The patches on my skin that I'd grown used to in the mirror looked harsher, colder under the fluorescent wash of corporate production. I knew that if they filmed me, someone would say something. Not on the day, maybe, but in editing, or in a Slack thread, or worse, in that coded feedback way they love to use. It just doesn't cut well. A little distracting in this context. Maybe we simplify the visual flow. They always said simplify when they meant remove. Once, months earlier, I had been in a group photo. Nothing formal, just a snapshot from a team offsite. I was standing at the end of the row, half in frame, when they posted the picture on the company's social page. My shoulder was still there, but my face had been cropped out. Not on purpose, probably. Not maliciously, but carelessly. The kind of mistake that only ever happens to the person you weren't thinking about to begin with. I didn't say anything. What would I say? I was there. I knew I was there, but I wasn't visible. And that became a pattern. So when the camera crew came back, this time to film our new onboarding series, I wasn't surprised when they asked Chris to be one of the representative voices. Of course they did. He had the clean smile, the easy posture, the voice that sounded rehearsed even when it wasn't. He represented something they were comfortable with. They asked a few others too. Never me. But this time was different. This time the producer asked for coverage shots. B-roll, they called it, of people working, talking, moving naturally through the space. And I was there, at my desk, typing, focused. She came up and asked if I minded being in the background. Just a walkthrough, no talking. I nodded, said it was fine, and it was, in theory. Until I saw the lens pointed at me, until I felt the heat of the light bounce off the side of my neck where the pigment had faded into porcelain white, until I remembered how I looked not in my mirror, but in theirs. I turned slightly, kept my eyes on my screen. Didn't look up, didn't give them a full face, just movement, just profile. I thought maybe if I didn't meet the lens I wouldn't have to see what it captured. Maybe I could stay anonymous, even when framed. The video came out 3 weeks later. I wasn't in it, not even in the background. They used the same room, the same scene, but from a different angle. Later, someone told me they decided on a tighter visual palette, that the content needed to stay aligned with the core identity. Words like that make you question your shape, your shadow, whether your presence disrupts harmony, whether your very existence bends the lines they want to keep straight. I didn't ask questions. I just kept showing up. But I stopped looking at the lens. Every time they brought in a camera after that, I stayed where I couldn't be seen. I trained myself to become negative space. You don't get cut if you never step into the frame. You don't get rejected if you refuse to audition. And the truth is, I didn't need the camera. I needed the work. I needed the process. I needed the quiet path that let me move without being seen. But something strange happened when I left that place. When I moved on. When I started speaking at events, pitching my own ideas, sharing my own voice on my own terms. The camera started, finding me again. And this time, I didn't flinch. Not because I thought I looked better, but because I'd stopped waiting for the world to approve the way I existed inside its borders. I had once been the man who turned away from every lens. Now, they were turning toward me. There were days when the office felt more like a group chat than a workplace. People drifting from desk to desk with coffee in hand, pausing to huddle over someone's screen and laugh at the latest meme, the latest viral video, the latest joke that would be old by lunch. The air was always buzzing with some inside joke, some pop culture reference, some shared language of distraction that I was never really fluent in. I tried to play along at first, but it was like nodding in a conversation you weren't part of. You catch the rhythm, but not the meaning. You laugh half a second too late. Eventually, I stopped trying. While they laughed, I worked. That wasn't some act of silent rebellion. It wasn't noble or strategic. It was just the only thing that made sense to me. I came in early because I liked the quiet before the day. Kicked in. I stayed late because it gave me time to think without being asked if I'd seen the latest clip or watched the latest drama unfold on someone else's screen. The work became its own rhythm, a kind of grounding. Numbers, frameworks, project flows. Those things didn't care about how I looked. They didn't react to my skin. They didn't flinch when I entered the room. They either made sense or they didn't. They either worked or they failed. And I liked that clarity. There was a product launch we were all assigned to. A big one. High stakes, high visibility. Everyone wanted to be on it, and everyone wanted credit. But they treated the process like a performance. They spent more time rehearsing how they'd present their slides than thinking through the content. They competed over who could crack the best joke during check-ins. I watched them mark up decks just to add flourishes, color-coded transitions, splashy intros. Meanwhile, I handled the integrations, the data, the structural mapping that no one noticed unless it broke. And I made sure it didn't. They got the spotlight in meetings. I got questions afterward. Managers came to me quietly, asked if I could check something before the review, asked if I could tighten a gap someone else had missed. I never got public. Thanks. But I got the responsibility. The quiet, behind-the-scenes kind, the kind you only give to someone you trust more than you're willing to admit. I remember one afternoon in particular. The room was buzzing with laughter. Chris had pulled up a meme on the big screen. It wasn't related to anything, but it got the kind of laugh people remember more than good ideas. Meanwhile, I was at my desk rewriting the technical brief because the original had a flaw that would have cost us days of cleanup. No one asked me to do it. I just couldn't ignore it. And when the final launch happened and the client praised how seamless it all felt, Chris smiled like it was his win. No one mentioned the brief. No one mentioned my name. But I didn't need the mention. I had the proof. I had the version histories, the timelines, the receipts. The project existed because someone stayed behind after the jokes had faded. Because someone caught the thing no one else saw. Because someone didn't need applause to know they'd done it right. I kept going like that for months, letting them have the spotlight while I held the structure. Letting them trend inside the building while I built things that would last after they moved on. And slowly, something shifted. I started getting invited to meetings they weren't in, asked to speak at small events, then larger ones. One of my reports got shared on an industry blog, then I got asked to mentor. Quietly at first, then officially. The day I submitted my resignation, Chris walked past my desk and said, "Didn't know you were leaving." I nodded. He said, "Where are you off to?" I didn't answer, not because I was being cold, but because, by that point, the answer didn't matter to him. The next place wasn't his world, it was mine, and I had earned it, not through charm or noise or clever one-liners, but through work. Quiet, consistent, invisible until it wasn't work. While they memorized punchlines, I built frameworks. While they refreshed feeds, I refined roadmaps. While they laughed, I listened to everything they weren't saying. And I let it sharpen me, because every meme fades, but structure holds. The list was posted on a Friday morning. A simple PDF on the event site with names arranged alphabetically beneath the header. Finalists accepted for jury review. I wasn't expecting it to hit me as hard as it did. I'd seen the list format. A dozen times before, skimmed through them at other conferences, other competitions. But this time, when I opened the file and started scrolling through the names, I wasn't looking for mine. I was looking for theirs. Specifically the ones I used to sit next to. The ones who whispered across desks and laughed in unison. The ones who filled rooms with noise but never with substance. I read through each line slowly, waiting for that familiar weight in my chest, the one that used to show up whenever their names got read and mine didn't. But the wait never came, because their names weren't there. Not Chris, not any of the others. No one from that old team made the list. For a long moment I just stared at the screen, the names forming columns like quiet reminders of how far everything had shifted. I wasn't smug about it. I didn't pump my fist or screenshot it to anyone. But something inside me finally settled. Not in a dramatic way. No thunderclap, no vindication soundtrack playing in the background. Just a soft, deep exhale I didn't realize I'd been holding, because now it was official. We had been measured by the same scale. No filters, no favorites, just work, and their work hadn't made it. Mine had. I was already sitting on the jury panel, had already been through the welcome calls, had my name printed in the event guide with a photo I didn't have to retouch. They asked me to review 5 projects. Anonymous submissions, no identifiers, just structure, clarity, originality. But before the panel assignments were sent out, I looked at the public finalists list and let my eyes move slowly, methodically, over the empty spaces where their names could have been. I didn't want revenge. I wanted silence. I wanted the kind of stillness that follows years of noise. And this was it. I kept thinking about all those meetings where their jokes filled the air, all those cheap laughs, all those moments when my skin was a punchline and their mediocrity went unnoticed because it was loud enough to distract. I used to wonder if I was invisible or if I just wasn't worth the focus. But now I understood. It wasn't that I was hard to see. It was that I didn't fit the shortcut. I didn't match the packaging they were used to validating. And because of that, they never thought they'd have to compete with me. They didn't think someone like me, quiet, marked, methodical, could beat them at a game they'd already assumed was theirs. And yet, here I was. And there they weren't. Over the next few days, the messages started coming in. Not from them. From others, people who remembered me from years back. From projects long buried under revisions and pivots. People who said they saw the listing, saw my name. Some were surprised, some weren't. One message just said, "About time." I didn't reply to most of them. I was already knee-deep in reviewing, in reading submissions that actually mattered. But I saved that last one. Because about time meant someone had noticed. Me, the way I worked, the way I carried weight even when I wasn't being acknowledged for it. And now, in this space, the acknowledgement came not with fanfare, but with responsibility. I wasn't here to celebrate the absence of others. I was here to make sure the right ones got through. The quiet builders, the overlooked thinkers, the ones who didn't need volume to be heard. I wasn't going to become the kind of person who once silenced me. I knew how it felt to sit outside. The list. I wasn't going to forget that just because I was on the inside now, but still, I let myself feel it. That quiet knowing. Their names weren't there. Mine was. And this time, that was enough. The room was quiet when their project came up. Not silent, just the kind of concentrated quiet that happens when people are trying to sound thoughtful. I recognized the work instantly, even before I saw the team name. There was something about the layout, the phrasing, the way the interface was structured. Familiar hands had shaped it. I'd worked beside those hands once. I knew the shortcuts they took, the language they borrowed, the Polish that always came first, substance second. And as the project brief loaded on the screen in front of me, I felt a dozen old memories rise up at once. Laughter, dismissal, being passed over and pushed back, smiling when it hurt, staying late because no one else would. I was the last juror to speak. The others went first, trading notes, offering praise in measured tones. They liked the visual concept, questioned the scalability, noted how the user flow looked strong on the surface but didn't quite hold under deeper logic. Good feedback, balanced, professional. No one knew what I knew. No one in that room knew. that the people behind this submission were the same ones who had once made my skin their punchline, and even if they had, it wouldn't have mattered. I wasn't here to settle scores. I was here to do what I'd always done. Look at the work, find what's real, say only what needs to be said. When it was my turn to speak, I paused, not to dramatize, just to breathe, just to make sure I said the right thing, not the satisfying thing, not the clever or cutting thing, but the honest thing. I kept my tone even. I spoke about structure, gaps in logic, the way the presentation leaned on aesthetics to hide that the solution lacked depth. I didn't mention names, I didn't smile, I didn't flinch, I just gave my review. Clear, measured, quiet. And when I finished, no one pushed back. There was nothing to push against. The facts stood on their own. They didn't make it past the round. Their project didn't move forward, and I said nothing more. Later, at the networking mixer, I saw them. Not all of them, just two. Chris wasn't there, or maybe he was and left early, but one of the others spotted me. His eyes caught mine for half a second too long, and he looked away just as fast. He recognized me. I know he did. He raised his glass awkwardly, as if to acknowledge, or maybe to apologize without words. I nodded once and turned back to the conversation I was already in. I didn't know him more than that. I left early that evening. I'd done what I came to do. Not just judge the work, but carry the weight of having once been judged and not let it turn me into the same thing. That was harder than anything. Not just surviving, but staying soft, remaining still, speaking with clarity when you could speak, with fire, letting them be seen, not because you need to remind them of what they did, but because you no longer carry it like a wound. They didn't deserve kindness, but I didn't give it for them. I gave it because I remembered how it felt when it wasn't given to me. That night, walking back to my hotel, the city wet with light and traffic, I passed a digital billboard on the corner. My face wasn't on it. No one stopped me in the street. But I knew who I was. I knew what I'd built. I knew I'd sat at a table they hadn't even qualified to approach, and I knew I had judged their work with more respect than they ever gave my face. That was the difference. That's what stayed with me. I evaluated. I spoke carefully. I moved forward. And I didn't need to be loud to be heard.